Stories that are untold, underreported, and all-out inspirational. Carey Pena reports.
Hey everyone, I'm Carey Pena. Thank you so much for listening to Carey Pena Reports on iTunes and Stitcher, and for watching our live feed. You can always see our shows on inspiredmedia360.com, of course on Facebook and YouTube at Inspired Media 360. We have a great guest today, a lovely lady who I've been wanting you to come into the studio and visit me for so long now, Joelle Hadley. How are you?
I'm great. It's so great to talk with you again. I think last time I was doing yoga, so
Yes.
I couldn't come into the studio.
Yes, you're a yogi.
Today I did yoga before I came.
Thank you. And you're bringing your calm sense to all of us. So Joelle is an amazing lady, and she is the president of Culture Coaches. We're going to be talking about how to find control with your life and maximize the time that you spend by being intentional and mindful about what you do day to day. Your tips are great. So I want to get right to it. And I want to start with how you got into this, being a culture coach. What drew you into that?
Yeah, you mean when I repotted myself?
When you
which
repotted,
is what you remembered
yes.
from our last conversation. I was in the media, just like you. I was in the newspaper business, back when we called it the newspaper business, right?
When it actually came out in print.
Right, and as you know, the industry is so fun. It's still so fun. It's changed a lot. I was in the media industry, newspaper industry for many, many years. I was the publisher of the Business Journal. Mm-hmm. So in that industry, it's like the CEO or the owner, even though I didn't own it.
And for those listening and watching, not in Arizona, the Business Journal is an incredible publication.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Just a pillar in our community. So loved it, loved it, loved it. I was pretty young. I was 28 when I became the publisher. So as a woman and 28, they kind of just patted me on my head like a little
That's
kid.
major.
You know? And Phoenix was just doing fantastic. So we really succeeded. But I was so young, Carey, that I really didn't have the leadership skills that I needed to lead everybody who had so much more experience, who had so much more season. So what I did is I really thought, how can I make a difference? Where's my sweet spot as a leader? And this idea of culture really came to me. This is before culture was even cool. Now it was the word of the year a couple years ago, right? Every tech company, definitely culture is where they're putting their focus. But back then, I wanted to create a great place to work. And personally, I had just lost my dad to cancer. So the whole idea of working and what does it all mean, and what does it all mean? And do we come to work every day and have a lot of stress and then we die sooner than we thought we were going to? So I was really doing a lot of soul searching. Plus, I wanted to still succeed. Yeah. So I really focused on creating a great place to work. What do the employees want? What do you need for resources? What do you need to succeed? And then I provided it. So we worked hard, but we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is possible to do that.
It absolutely is. And what we know from science is that when our brains are happy, when they're relaxed, and when they're mindful and focused, we perform better.
Now, that's what I want to get to, because a lot of times it's easier said than done. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks out there, they think about those things and, of course, want to live a joyful life and want to, be good to others, but then life gets in the way sometimes. So you talk a lot about emotional intelligence and how to achieve that. That's more than a buzzword. That is something real that can be achieved. You wrote to me the other day because I had a show last week with a great guy, Tim Hattrick, who's a well-known radio personality here in town. And for those of you who haven't seen this episode, I highly recommend that you go on our site, inspiredmedia360.com. Check it out. So he was a very popular radio host, and he lost that gig. And he went out on his own, and he put all of his 401k into doing this, and he lost it. And the whole episode is about how he maintained his sense of integrity, his positive spirit. He went to drive for Uber and UPS and worked at Amazon, and talked about how he actually found joy in all of those things and learning. And now he's back on the radio and back to being a morning show host, which is what it was his heart's desire. So you wrote to me saying that interview really struck you, and that Tim exhibited a lot of emotional intelligence. Why?
Yeah. Number one, resiliency. So one of the key elements of being emotionally intelligent, and I like to say it's not an oxymoron. We can be intelligent with our emotions, even the men, right? My husband jokes that he married me because he doesn't have very much emotional intelligence. But ironically, men have a side of emotional intelligence that women can learn from, and then women have emotional intelligence characteristics that men can learn from. But number one is resiliency, the ability to get back up after something really tough. And that's what emotional intelligence is about. And if you look at about anybody famous, Oprah's kind of one of the most famous people who had a really tough life, and yet she still was so successful. We've been talking about entrepreneurs. You have to have resiliency. And Tim had resiliency that despite him not being able to find a job and going through what he went through financially, he still kept going. And I think what happens is when you keep going and you have a good attitude, life and the universe presents stuff to you that maybe they wouldn't if you didn't have that spirit. Yeah. The second piece is authenticity. So authenticity is a big part of emotional intelligence. And what I loved about listening to his story is that he was not afraid to share the mistakes he made. And so for anybody, even, leaders or managers out there, I think in the workplace, we think we shouldn't share our mistakes or we shouldn't admit our weaknesses. And I think our society, we're pressured to be perfect. Yeah. But ironically, we don't connect with people that are perfect. We want to connect with people that have made mistakes and that admit things aren't going so well. It allows us to make that connection. Yeah. And connecting is a big part of emotional intelligence.
It's funny that you say that because in anchoring the news, you feel a lot of pressure to have your look together and have everything be perfect. And I've had many not so perfect days on the news. Words don't always come out the right way. One time my eyelash came loose during, as I was reading really serious news, and it's just flopping, and people are tweeting me going, your eyelashes. And one of the producers, who was a great producer, Lisa McGee, she said to me, you know what? That's just a real moment. It's funny, and you just have to, because I was, of course, mortified.
Now we like you even better.
Did it feel as bad as did it look as bad as it felt? And she goes, it made you real. Yeah. So I totally relate with what you're saying. Now, some of the new things that you've been talking to people about have to do with using your brain power, and you say that 75% of our brain power, we lose it when we let someone get on our nerves.
Yeah. So I love to study how the brain works. I think for most of us in life and in work, we kind of go to the opposite way of how our brains and bodies really work. And so if we can understand it better, we don't have to work quite so hard, and we can enjoy our jobs a little bit more and perform a little bit more, and also just be more focused and energetic when we get home to our loved ones, right? Yeah. I hear that a lot. I work so hard, and then I lose my impulse control when I get home with my kids. And that's a key part of the brain, is that our brain can only take so much impulse control through the day. And what I mean by that is that in a professional world, we might be frustrated or we might be stressed, but we hold it together, right? We hold it together when we're on air. We hold it together in front of the client, in front of our boss. Well, after so many times of holding it together, when deep inside we'd like to say a 4-letter word or throw something across the table, and I'm not saying you do that, but just that lack of being authentic throughout the day because of the world we live in, our brains can only take so much of that. So what happens is by the time we get home, we kind of lose that impulse control aspect in our brain, which is why we end up not being our best selves at home. So part of what I teach in emotional intelligence is providing a workplace where we can be more authentic, where people can, just get some stress out. And that's why a lot of the high-tech companies have some of those activities that they do in the workplace, like pool and ping pong and things like that. We're getting out our stress so that we can have more impulse control throughout the day. Back to the 75% piece of it is that our brain has, think of it kind of like pistons in our brain, and when we're fully engaged in our zone, we've heard that before, those pistons are working together to make great complex thought. That's creativity and problem solving and us at our best selves. When our emotions kind of come up underneath that, so we read an email that gets under our skin, somebody says something to us, somebody doesn't look us in the eye, that kind of gets to us emotionally. We call it the put down, let down, shut down syndrome. So somebody's hurt our feelings, we're disappointed, or maybe we feel like we don't have a voice. Those are the common triggers. What happens emotionally is we go into this kind of primitive reaction. It's called fight or flight. And so it's an element of fight or flight, but it's just enough that physiologically we're releasing a stress hormone called cortisol. And that cortisol tells the brain that we kind of need to have blood and oxygen and adrenaline rush to our body to get us ready for that, like saber-toothed tiger around the corner. But the saber-toothed tiger isn't around the corner anymore. It's just our bosses and our coworkers and our family or our kids. What happens in that process is that the brain's complex thinking kind of shuts down, because now we're on physical threat. Now we're on physical focus. So what happens is, in those stressful moments, in those things that just get under our skin emotionally, we lose the ability to have good brain power. We lose rationale, we lose perspective, and then we don't see things as clearly. We see things more certain. We're not as open-minded. And then what comes out of our mouth, our tone, our words, they're not as effective as they could be.
Right. And things that you'll regret later.
Exactly.
So what do you do to combat that? You go and speak to people in big companies, big and small. What do you tell? What are some practical tips to fight that? Because that happens even to the best of us. You can be a completely positive person, a nice person, but still there's going to be things that stress you out, cause you anxiety, even, make you a little upset or angry. How do you combat that and be more emotionally intelligent in the moment?
Yeah. Right? Yeah. So, certainly build skills like resiliency and authenticity, but in the moment, and I love that, in that moment, research shows that about 83% of the time, Carey, we can handle the moment, but 17% of the time, it's just enough pressure that we don't show up well. So I have this little 4-letter tip. It's called S.O.S.S. If you can remember this, or just even remember one of them. The first S stands for stop. So stop those thoughts that make you angry. A lot of times it's a dramatic statement of she's always late or he always does that. Stop that, what I call awfulizing in the brain. And if you can stop that, you've probably told your kids count to 3 or count to 10 and calm down. We're just big kids. We're just kids with long legs.
Yeah, right.
So some of the same things. So stop that awfulizing in your brain. The O stands for Oxygenate. Take a couple of deep breaths. And I joke to some of my clients, you're paying me to tell you to breathe? I am, because breath actually will bring oxygen back up to our brain. Remember how I said our brain's kind of the fuels heading back down to our heart and our lungs and our bodies? By taking deep breaths, and this is why I love yoga so much for emotional intelligence, we're kind of getting fuel back up to our brains. I call it the EpiPen for the brain.
Yeah.
So 3 deep breaths. And if you can actually focus on the breath coming into your belly and then coming out, then that will calm you and you'll start to think clearly. The next letter, S, stands for strengthen your heart. And what I mean by that is to think thoughts of gratitude. So what we know from research is that when we think of something, a person, a place, or experience, maybe when your children were born, just kind of going there in your mind, that lowers our stress hormone cortisol and increases an anti-aging hormone called DHEA. So it just makes us feel good in that moment. So stop, take a couple deep breaths, think of something that's really special to you. I call it an appreciation anchor. And then the last S stands for seek information. And what that means is ask good questions. So instead of being frustrated and banging your hand against the table, you ask good questions. Who could I call for help? How can I make sure this mistake doesn't happen again? What could I do to fix this? And when you get curious about how to change something versus frustrated, remember those pistons I talked about in the brain? The good questions get the brain going again, and it gets us out of our emotional part of our brain.
Those are such great tips.
S.O.S.S.
So you will love what I do with my 6-year-olds when things start to get, in the morning, that mad rush to get out the door. And then, of course, we can't find something like 5 minutes before we're supposed to leave.
I don't have kids, and it still sounds like my house.
So we have what we call a yoga moment, which it's the funniest thing in the world to see a 6-year-old boy doing, okay, mommy, yoga moment. And then I somehow have convinced them, because they're awesome, to be in love with the Beatles. So we get in the car and my son goes, all right, let's put on Let It Be and we'll have a yoga moment.
That's an appreciation anchor, right? Yeah. So the words are calming you. It's that gratitude place. It's that centering place. That's fantastic.
So are you living your best life?
I do my best to live that every day. I really am. I love my life so much, but I also am very conscious, Carey, about doing things that release those happy hormones.
Yeah.
And so we have to be more intentional to make small. The nice thing is about creating mindfulness in your life and creating a better life is that you don't have to move to an island. You don't have to quit your job. It's small moments that you can do. When you get into the car, when you're not with your kids, don't talk on the phone. Don't even listen to the radio. Just have some quiet. that only takes a few minutes. Or I tell people, if you have to be on the phone or you want to listen to your radio, then 5 minutes before you go into the office, just close your eyes and breathe. Getting to bed a little bit more each night. There's little things we can do. Taking a break every 90 minutes during the workday, just getting up and taking a walk around the building. Little rituals that we can do throughout the day that center us and help at taking a deep breath when we're feeling
just
stressed. Stopping, right?
Yeah.
So there are little moments throughout the day that actually build up versus feeling like you have to make a major decision, or I have to go to the gym and do a spin class. Certainly that would help, but it's not major time and it's not major change in your life.
So is it so gratifying when you see the person that you know has a lot of angst going on or a lot of anxiety, and you maybe, work with them and coach them, and you see a shift there? How does that make you feel?
Oh, that's the best feeling in the world. And every once in a while, I'll do a workshop or I'll do a speech, and then I leave the crowd and I think, did they like it? Was it impactful? And then I'll run into somebody and they'll say, just like you said, those words that you shared stuck with me.
Yeah.
And it really made an impact. And then it just fills me with so much joy. And I just did a workshop the other day over at the Desert Botanical Garden with the corporate group. And I taught them some information about emotional intelligence. And the lady came up to me and asked me some questions about how to employ some of these things, and that this information would change her life. And
That's
that she was
huge.
so grateful that her company exposed her to it. And that's worth more than anything. It feels so good. It filled me with oxytocin for sure.
That's how I always feel when I tell a story. It could be a simple story, but I know that it has the ability to reach so many people. Congratulations, by the way, because you are newly married and your husband is here. He's from Colorado. And so you guys, just really quickly, you're like in honeymoon phase, and you got married by a medicine man. Can you tell us quickly about that?
We did. We're still in honeymoon phase, and we live in different cities. So we tell people that's why we're still so happy, right? You get our own little
best personal
space, exactly. And Telluride and Phoenix, other
that's
best
so
of both
cool,
worlds.
yeah.
We both love Native American culture. Ken lives in Colorado, and I here. So we have been going back and forth between the Navajo Reservation. We spend a lot of time on Lake Powell, and so just the whole Arizona Native American culture has been special to both of us. And when we were planning our wedding, we knew that we wanted it to be small and private and very spiritual. Legally, we got married here in the backyard of the lady that actually introduced us, Ann Siner, who's the owner of My Sister's Closet. She's our little angel that introduced us. And it just kind of came to me as I want something different. And so I said, let's get a shaman or a medicine man. And we searched and searched, and then finally came across this incredible man who's a Havasupai Indian. He actually lives in Sedona. His name is James Ukwala. And I sent you some of the pictures.
Yes.
I mean, he's in full dress, and he was so amazing. And back to the ritual, the things that we can do throughout our day that are very ritualistic. That's what I love about Native American culture.
Yeah.
They are so cultured,
Yes.
and culture means everything, their values. And the rituals that we experienced at our wedding were just so meaningful. It was just such a beautiful memory.
Congratulations. I love those
you.
pictures, by the way. And where can people find you?
You can find me at theculturecoaches.com and Joelle M. Hadley on Twitter.
Joelle, thanks for being here. Always love chatting with you. And thanks to all of you for listening and for watching. Be sure to subscribe to all of our shows. We put out a lot of content at inspiredmedia360.com. And we have a new show. You'll love the name of it, called In the Moment. It's our new talk show, so you can check that out every Wednesday. And be sure to connect with us on Facebook and on YouTube at Inspired Media 360. Today's show produced and engineered by Shannon Hernandez, brought to you by Inspired Media 360. Until next time, stay inspired.